This is a hilarious story. Also, apologies. Looks like we spelled that wrong. It's Archegos, not Achegos, but it's okay. Let's put this up there on the screen. Archegos founder Bill Wang, the former CFO, charged with securities fraud. Guys, this story is completely insane. So if you don't know who Bill Wang is, he was worth roughly $20 billion as of a year ago. But now him and the former CFO of his company, Archegos Capital, have been indicted on securities fraud and racketeering in what they say is one of the most massive fraud and manipulation schemes in the history of Wall Street that nearly jeopardized the entire U.S. financial system.
Oh my God.
And this is nuts because what it exposes are all kinds of weird regulatory loopholes through which family offices are governed, loose regulation based upon that, and the way that the banks themselves just simply believe the words of companies. So to be clear here, the word of Bill Wang and his company Archegos was good enough for the top banks on all of Wall Street. They show that under the family office founder that the blind spot makes it so they will simply take your word as a company to loan you hundreds of millions and billions of dollars,
wow,
which you can then use that money in order to place immense bets on other people's stock and then wildly swing the U.S. financial system. So here's what they say. This is from the U.S. attorney. Lies fed inflation, inflation fed more lies. Last year, the music stopped, the bubble burst, the prices dropped. And when they did, billions of dollars evaporated overnight. So what they're charged with is securities fraud, that manipulating hundreds of billions of dollars in stock. So what they point to is that they have trades as counterparties are allowing, large purchases then increase people's stock price. The increase in stock price, which he uses, or the purchases he uses with using his fake word, are then used to inflate securities, which then through complicated securities fraud, you are able to reap profits off of that. But it requires everything to keep going up. So when the music stops, the bottom falls out. Krystal, they went from 1.5 billion to allegedly 35 billion under management in a single year.
Wow.
This is totally nuts.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit complicated. The way I understood it is basically like a high-class pyramid scheme.
Yeah, that's it.
Because that's exactly what it is. I mean, they keep, as long as you keep going up and up and up, you don't have to ever pay the piper.
Yes.
But the minute that there was a faltering, then everything, the whole house of cards completely collapsed. The way the New York Times described it is prosecutors say Bill Wang, her firm's owner, and his former chief financial officer had deliberately misled their banks. So they lied to the banks to borrow money and then place these enormous bets on a handful of stocks through sophisticated securities. Those trades were obfuscated, so it was not transparent. That was part of the problem by the loose regulations governing so-called family offices like Archegos, where wealthy individuals manage their investments. When that strategy collapsed, so when the price went down on one of these stocks significantly, the whole thing collapses. In just a few days, $100 billion in shareholder value vanished, hitting the portfolios of investors who had invested when the unseen hand of Archegos was actually what was pushing those stocks to new heights. So their use of these highly leveraged, sophisticated financial instruments was what was actually driving the price spikes. So they had effectively rigged the market, and because you had no transparency around it, the banks and nobody knew that it was really them that were causing the inflation of these stocks. And so then when one of them fell, they were so highly leveraged that then there were margin calls and the whole thing ultimately collapsed.
What else is fascinating, like I was referring to the family offices, which is that in recent years, there are not any regulations over family offices in the same way for public disclosure as for hedge funds. So Archegos was just one of several hedge funds which is converted to a family office in recent years because they are not under the same number of amount of regulations by the SEC. And thus, what's been happening is that these family office hedge funds are able to just simply tell the banks, take our word for it. And what I love about this is it just exposes how BS it all is.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Right.
A car loan. How many people out there had to go get a car loan? Paperwork. Oh my God. Mortgage. Any credit application. You have to go through and talk to your landlord from like 9 years ago.
Right.
In order to get all this done. When you're trying to borrow like $500,000, these guys are getting spotted billions based upon their word. No due diligence done by the bank. which is illegal, actually. You're not supposed to just loan people money. But they're like, yeah, he's good for it. Wire him
and
$5
also,
billion, $10 billion.
This dude had been in trouble for doing something very similar before,
Yeah.
and had been like disbarred, and he kind of fell off the radar for a while, and then he makes this big comeback, basically like with a revamped scheme of his previous fraud. So pretty interesting, and I think you're right. It really does expose how fake and rigged and non-transparent so much of this is. I mean, there is no way that this individual is the only one who's engaging these type of shenanigans. Not a chance.
And
not a chance.
Interesting. Trung Phang, he does these great threads on Twitter. Let's put this up there. I highly recommend everybody go and check his thread out. But he says in the thread that due to the nature of the swaps that Archegos had built up, their portfolio, like I mentioned, went from 1.5 to 35 billion. But with the nature of the swaps, Krystal, they were total exposure was $100 billion. And just simply the decline of Viacom stock alone is what led to this entire thing going down, because they were leveraged at 5 times. So just a 15 to 20% sell-off is enough to wipe out an entire element of the portfolio. And then what happens is that when the banks start selling all their large blocks of Archegos-linked companies and a 30% decline on a single day, boom, you just see how it all completely falls apart. So look, guys, all it really is a perfect view. And it's enough to try and explain swaps and the way this all works is at a very basic level, you can manipulate stock and then tell the banks that you're not doing it, and then they'll still wire you money. Yeah. As long as you're worth over $1 billion.
Yeah.
While normal people, I mean, think about how hard it is to get a freaking credit card for half the people in this country right now. So really, it's just completely ridiculous.
Yep, absolutely. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.